So in this video, I would like to expand on the things I said in the lore basic video, specifically on the topic of the Fatui. As I said in my previous video, the Fatui is an organization that serves the Tsaritsa of Snezhnaya, or the Cryo Archon, and it is also said to be the strongest army of the Seven Nations. They are also infiltrating every single nation we pass by. We can usually differentiate the Fatui by this symbol that most of them wear somewhere, like on the insignia and so on. The Fatui use devices called delusions, which are basically imitations of visions that can be produced from the remains of gods like Orobashi in Inazuma. They are also said to be even more powerful than visions, but they use the user's life force to function. Although it's unclear as to exactly how they damage their user, because people like Diluc's father, Krepus, and Teppei from the Watatsumi resistance both suffered damage of their usage, but Krepus supposedly lasted much longer than Teppei, so Teppei was much more affected by the side effect. Also we have harbingers who are using them like Signora and Child, and neither of them showed any side effects, but I must note that Signora has special circumstances, since she's the Crimson Lich, but I'll get into more of that later. Child showed some serious fatigue, but that was probably mostly not because of his delusion, but rather his other powers. Also, I don't know why, but many people don't know that Fatui is a plural, and the single member is called a Fatus. So I already talked about two of the harbingers a bit there, but now I want to get into the specifics of each one. And yes, there will be some massive spoilers, so I'm just warning you to proceed with caution. As you already know, there are probably 11 Fatui harbingers that are given higher authority than other humans by the Tsaritsa, and they all fill their specific roles, which means that as far as we know, not all of them are fighters, and the rankings they get correspond more to the overall sum of things they bring to the table, more so than their fighting strength, which is often mistaken by people because of what Child says in his profile, but that's more or less just the fault of translation. The Fatui harbingers are inspired by commedia dell'arte, which is a type of Italian theatre. It is characterized by masked characters, and the harbingers are masked. Also, one of their characteristics is the lazo, or something foolish, which we can see in Genshin's Winter Night Lazo, which is a popular Fatui trailer. From all of this we can conclude that the Fatui harbingers are basically masked fools, which kinda fits because Fatui in Latin means fools. The first harbinger, who is actually not a harbinger, probably, is Pierro, or the Jester, who is the director of the Fatui, and at first everyone thought of him as the number one harbinger, but for the last year or so most people have theorized that he's probably just the director and he doesn't count as one of the harbingers, because otherwise the rankings wouldn't really fit, and all the clues we have lead to that being the case. In Commedia dell'arte, Pierro is this sad clown who has a broken heart by Columbina, but gradually the character of Pierro evolves from a jester to an avatar of lawless. In terms of Commedia dell'arte, I often get the feeling that Hoyoverse is trying to make their connections more symbolic than anything else, but it also seems to me like the harbingers could present the opposite of their role in Commedia dell'arte, but that's just my speculation. Talking about his in-game lore though, he was a Khaenri'ah royal mage before he became one of the Fatui, so it's fair to say that he was a high-ranking official even in Khaenri'ah, and now that it has been destroyed, his goals somehow align with the Tsaritsas. We also know that he was living with our sibling for a time. From what we know about him, it seems like he was opposing the sages of Khaenri'ah in the past, but couldn't stop them from doing something that tore away the Veil of Sin, which we have no clue what that is yet. When he became the director of the Fatui, he started recruiting some of the harbingers. We know that he recruited the Doctor when he saw him doing some heretical arts way back in Sumeru. At Tarasuna he sent the Doctor to persuade Scaramouche to join the Fatui, so basically he recruited him too. But more on that later. At some point in time he also found Rosalind Prushka Lowfolter, aka Signora, and persuaded her to join the Fatui, and even later gave her the cryo delusion she used. We also know that he gave Tartaglia his illusion when he received it. We also know that he has some very important information about the sky being fake, which he gave to Scaramouche, and that's a big thing being discussed in the lore community. Number 11, Tartaglia, codename Child, and actual name Ajax, is the number 11 of the Fatui Harbingers, which automatically evokes in mind that he is the weakest out of all of them, but that's not necessarily the case, because as I explained earlier, let's say that he is just the least important of them. In Commedia dell'arte, he is far-sighted and stutters. His roles can differ a lot in the story, but usually represents the lower working class. I'm not actually sure if any of this matters to the lore, so I'm just throwing it up here. He is known for his love of the thrill of the battlefield, but his lore is much deeper than that in the literal sense, because when he was young he fell into the abyss, where he met his master, Skur, who taught him his fighting techniques and also his strongest move, the Foul Legacy transformation, which by the way isn't named after Skurk's master, aka the Foul. This is just a mistranslation, which gives him great strength in exchange for a lot of fatigue later. He appears friendly on the surface, but he is a warrior who pledges loyalty to the Fatui as any other harbinger. Even though his motivations may not be evil, he is willing to do some evil things, like drowning Liua in order to achieve his goals. He cherishes his family a lot. In fact, it was probably one of his primary motivations of joining the Fatui, and whenever we meet him, he talks about them and he sends them money and gifts home all the time. Despite that, he seems to be unquestionably loyal to the Tsaritsa, so who knows what might happen in the future between the traveler and him. He has a hydrovision and a cryo-delusion, and as of now we can't be sure why exactly his vision started malfunctioning in Fontaine, but it seems that it's somehow connected to his constellation, which is the Narwhal. Many Genshin theorists suggest that his constellation is not just a Narwhal, but the all-devouring Narwhal that we fight in the game, which could imply that all the characters' constellations are somehow related to the star beasts, since that's what the Narwhal is probably supposed to be. I have no idea. This post could be completely vacant, or there could be a traitor who left the Fatui, or it could be just someone we haven't even met yet. There is a ton of theories on who it could be, like for example Diluc's father Crepus, and so on, but I don't want to get too deep into that. Pantalone, aka Regrator, in the Commedia dell'arte he is one of the most important characters, and he has exceptional greed and high status. He mainly revolves around money, which actually fits pretty well in Genshin 2. We don't know that much about Pantalone since he isn't in the game yet, but we know that he doesn't have a vision and that he was born into poverty, which led him to question the gods, and he started finding other ways to control his own life, such as having a ton of money. He is the banker of the Fatui, who provides the Fatui with funds. He is also working closely with the Doctor, and he is said to have very high ambitions, which fits with the Commedia too. He also tried to make an alternative currency to Mora, and he tested that in the Fortress of Meropide. And now that Zhongli no longer controls the Mora, maybe in the future we will see more of that idea. That's basically all of the lore relevant stuff I know about Pantalone for now, so let's move to the next one. La Signora, aka the Fair Lady, or as we learn later in the story, the Crimson Witch of Flame. In Commedia dell'arte she is the wife of Pantalone, and she is beautiful and calculating, and also has a specific kind of posture, all of which fit pretty well with what we see in the game. She was known as Rosalind Krushka Lowfolter, because she was still human living in Mondstadt. Now she wears a cryo delusion and has no vision because of her special powers. She is the one who takes Fenty's and Zhongli's noses in the story, and we also witness her dying by the Raiden Shogun's blade. Even though there were many theories of her revival in the past, that now seems to be unlikely, as it is quite explicit in the Winter Night Latsop trailer. As I mentioned, she used to be an ordinary human living in Mondstadt and studied at the Sumeru Academia, but then her lover Rostam died during the Cataclysm, and she was mad mainly at the Anemo Archon but also at the whole world, and the hatred transformed her into a living flame, which is why she became known as the Crimson Witch of Flame. It is hard to say if she treated Venti as she did because of her past, because she's supposed to not have clear memories of it. As she's present quite a bit in the story, and she's also dead now, I don't have anything more to say about her for now. Sandrone, aka Marionette. This is another harbinger that we haven't seen yet in the game, so we don't know as much about her. In the Commedia, she, or rather he, is a crude, clever and cunning peasant who has a wife named Pulcinella, which is why many people theorize about who is actually who, the robot or the girl. These characters were originally presented as puppets in the Commedia, which fits pretty well in Genshin. Also, they are supposed to have a child, so we will have to wait and see if that becomes a plot point sometime in the future. Sandrone is described as a researcher who specializes on automatons and other machines, and we can see her in the trailer riding something that looks like a modified ruin machine from Canria. Also, we have heard of her in a world quest, where it was implied that she was interested in a clock machine that also works like a lie detector named Curve, which fits her description. Other than this, there are many theories about who she is. Right now I'm inclined to believe in the theory that she is in fact Marianne Guillotine, or at least she is made to be similar to her, as Marianne is a sister of Alain Guillotine, who used to be a genius mechanic and inventor. It will also make sense to me that the robot is somehow connected to Alain Guillotine, because of his interest in machines. But other theories involve her being Guizhong, who was also known for her interest in machines and died way back then. I won't talk about all the theories that emerged from the community, but these two are, I would say, the two main ones. It's also interesting to note that she looks quite similar to Catherine, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was some connection. Scaramouche, aka Baldir or Kabukimono, which is his Inazuman nickname, who later becomes the Wanderer, otherwise known as the legendary head guy. I actually think that this is one of the most well developed characters in Genshin Impact, thanks to multiple quests and lore exploring his past and also his current self, and I just overall feel that we see a lot of his important life moments happen to him directly, while we often only hear about those in case of other characters. In Commedia he is a clown with a hint of villainous traits. He is also often connected to puppetry, which actually makes a lot of sense, because in Genshin he is literally a living puppet made by the Raiden Shogun. So this is probably the harbinger we actually know the most about, maybe together with Child. And his story is told quite in detail even in the main plotline, so I won't analyze it too deeply. Basically he was created by the Electro Archon as a prototype for her new puppet body, that she would later use instead of her own. So you could say that from the start his body was made so that it can receive a gnosis and become an Archon. Scaramouche was discarded, well, because it was just a prototype, and the Raiden Shogun, or the Electro Archon, thought that it would be too cruel to destroy him, so she let him live. He later understood this as his first betrayal. When he first woke up in Tatarasuna, the man who found him was named Mikoshi Nagamasa, and he basically took him in. There he received the name Kabukimono. Later he met Niwa, a blacksmith who he regarded as a dear friend, but later Niwa was killed by the Doctor in his secret mission in Inazuma at the time, and he deceived Scaramouche into believing that Niwa has betrayed him, which would be his second betrayal. The third betrayal happened when he befriended a young sickly boy who lost his family and was living with him in Tatarasuna. He and the boy promised each other to live together as a family forever, but the boy eventually died to his illness, and thus he broke the promise he made to Scaramouche. At least that's what happened in his eyes. After his 3 betrayals, he was recruited by Pierro into the Fatui and started working mainly taking missions in the Abyss and experimenting with the Doctor, while wanting to achieve his own goal and become a god, like he was originally destined to. And then basically the plot of Sumeru happened, so I'll just quickly summarize it. He became a god after he used the gnosis that he got from Inazuma, but we together with Nahida defeated him and took his gnosis from him. At this point his Archon quest happened and we experienced him basically trying to erase himself from history and failing, losing his memories, becoming the Wanderer, and eventually becoming one with his old self and receiving a new anima vision. Now he is the Wanderer, but with all of his memories and stuff of being Scaramouche. The only thing that changed is that almost nobody remembers Scaramouche and everyone only knows the Wanderer, which also means that in the eyes of everyone else the 6th seat of the Fatui Harbingers has been vacant for years and nobody knows why. At the very end he also tells us something like that he no longer wants to escape his past but atone for what he did, and now he is also helping Nahida with her stuff. So I would say that his story is mostly wrapped up. The only other things I would like to mention is that he was the one who originally mentioned to us that the Sky of Tevat is fake, and that the Jester had to know about him finding this out. He is also the one who told us about the Jester being a Khaenri'ah mage in the past. Now he seems to be very furious about what the Doctor did to him, and maybe at some point in the future we'll see him getting his revenge. Pulcinella, or the Rooster. In the Commedia he is often depicted with his long pointy nose. He is often also short, and he is a member of the upper class with a cunning and scheming personality. In the Genshin world he is a mayor in Snezhnaya, and he doesn't seem to have any fighting powers, but we don't know if he has a vision or delusion. What's interesting about him is that he is currently taking care of Child's family, which could play an important role if Child were to ever change sides. Something many people noticed about him is his pointy ears that make it seem like he belongs to the same race that Klee, Layla and the other such characters probably belong to, but that's just a theory. Also, it's interesting that unlike the other Harbingers who were directly picked by Pierro, Tartaglia became one of the Fatui on Pulcinella's recommendation, and he later became a Harbinger. Arlecchino, aka the Knave. In Commedia, she or he in the Commedia is often depicted as a light-hearted, nimble and astute servant, often acting according to her own plans. This is the part that will maybe get outdated pretty soon, as it's highly likely that she will have some important quests involving her soon. So far our information on her is very mixed, and it's hard to figure out the exact truth, because by her colleagues she is described as crazy, insane and willing to stab anyone in the back if it's profitable for her. But what we actually see in the game is a person that really cares about her children and nation, and she also offered a lot of help during Fontaine's crisis. Though we still can't forget that she runs the Fatui orphanage, also known as the House of the Hearth, which operates on some really cool principles. We learn in one of the Inazuma world quests that what the Fatui by her command do is incite conflict across the 7 nations and then take in the orphans created by all the killings, and basically make these orphans into future Fatui soldiers. This is all made with the Knave being the one to lead these actions, so she is definitely not innocent, even though we don't know for sure if she was the one to give these orders, but she also seems to just let it happen anyway. She has a pyro vision, which means that there is a high chance she becomes playable in the future, so I hope we will get some more explanations later in the story. The children of her orphanage call her Father, and it seems at least on the surface that she really cares for them. What's interesting about her design is her eyes with the little X's in them, and also her black hands that look corrupted. We actually met one more character in the game with the exact same hands, Caterpillar from the Narcissenkreuz Ordo, which makes me wonder if she too is a Hilcher or something like that. We also know that she killed the previous Knave, and though we can't be sure if she was also a Harbinger, we know that she succeeded her as the director of the orphanage. She also helped Linny and Lynette when she saved them from an evil noble that adopted them. She also helped Fremine to help him discover the truth about his mother. She also refused to give them a delusion in the past, which seems to be because she truly cares for their good. At the end of the Fontaine Archon quest, she receives the Hydronosis as a diplomatic gift, and that's all I have to say about her, for now at least. Columbina, or Damselet. She is the one we see singing on Signora's grave, and the one who talks to the Doctor at the end of the Winter Night Lazzo trailer. She has quite the creepy presence, and even the other Harbingers warned us about her, so it seems that she doesn't show everything there is to her. In the Commedia, she's Arlecchino's mistress, and she's a comic servant playing a tricky slave type character, and she's also Pierro's wife, but so far none of this has any connections to what we have seen in the game. As I already said, she's said to be extremely dangerous by Tartaglia and Scaramouche. Also, as she is one of the top 3 Harbingers, she is said to have powers that rival that of gods. Dottore, or the Doctor. He is the Harbinger we first see in the Genshin manga, where he confronts Diluc, and also is revealed to have experimented heavily on children, including Chloe. In the Commedia, he is usually very self-loving and greedy. His role is often being an obstacle in others' way, and he is mostly interacting with Pantalone as his friend. All of this seems to correspond at least a bit with what we see in the game, as Pantalone also works with him closely. Before he became a Fatui Harbinger, he used to be a scholar in Sumeru known as Zandik. Zandik had an obsession with creating enhanced humans, and he was later chased out of his hometown because of it. He was interested in the technology he found in the desert, as it was not created under the rule of the Seven, and also stumbled after many notes left by Khaenri'ahs and wanted to find ways to weaponize the forbidden knowledge. He was then involved in many researches. For example, he researched Lazar, and there are records of him wanting to control the Aranara. The Academia, however, became suspicious of him, and he was eventually expelled, which led him to be later invited by Pierro to the Fatui, as he was promised resources for his research. Under his guidance, the Fatui performed more research in Elazar, and he was able to cure cholera with it. The treatment he used was made out of God's remains, which tormented her instead, and later it was sealed by Sinon. And as I previously said, he then infiltrated Tatarasuna and recruited Scaramouche, and then happened the events of the manga, when he confronted Diluc and so on. He made many experiments with Scaramouche and unlocked his powers that were sealed by the Raiden Shogun, and modified him to even greater abilities. We also know that at some point of his life he decided to create segments of himself at different ages and assign each of them some roles. Then all the events of the main story in Sumeru happened, when he in summary experimented with the Akasha, that harnessed all the knowledge of Sumeru people and worked on a project to make Scaramouche into the god that would later rule in Sumeru. We didn't have any direct confrontation with him until the end of the Archon quest, where he negotiated for the Electro and Dendronosis with Nahida for destroying all of his other segments, and then also telling her about the previously mentioned secrets of the false sky, as well as the concept of descenders, which are basically beings who aren't originally from Teyvat, but is even more complicated than that. Il Capitano, or the Captain. This is the Harbinger that I'm personally the most excited to meet in the game because of his design and what we know of him so far. In the Commedia he often talks at length about made-up conquests and attempts to impress others. He often gets carried away by his tales and others don't buy it. He's very opportunistic and greedy, but boasts about his loyalty and bravery, which is basically the exact opposite of what we hear about him in the game, where Grandmaster Varka says that he's very brave to go against the gods as an ordinary mortal, and he is said to have the absolute righteousness by Scaramouche. He has a very high reputation amongst the Fatui, and even Tartaglia thinks highly of his fighting powers. What's also interesting about his design is the fact that in the trailer he is shown without showing his face, which is also noted by Varka and could be an important plot point in the future. We also know that he is currently in Natlan, probably to get the last gnosis for the Tsaritsa. There are two main theories of his identity. Even though there is a lot of them, at this point it's really hard to choose the most probable one, so I personally believe that he could be Imun Lauker, who is a historical figure that lived in the ancient Salvin Dagnir, which is today's Dragonspine. Or he could be the Bloodstained Knight, who was a knight living around the same time as Signora and her lover Rostam, and was said to be obsessed with justice. But that's basically all we know about him. Even his rank is highly speculative. Because of his high reputation and so on, most people, including myself, believe that he is the number one, but we can't be sure. So that's all I have to say about the Fatui Harbingers. The final topic I would like to discuss is the present situation and some other random points. So as of now, we are unsure as to what exactly is the Tsaritsa's goal once she gets all the gnosis, but we do know that she is planning to, quote, rebel against the heaven and burn away the old world, which could mean whatever, but people speculate multiple purposes and I'm going to share some of them. Now that we know that the gnosis are remains of the third descender, maybe she's trying to revive him once she receives all of them. The gnosis also represent the authority of the 7 archons, and if she were to destroy them all at once, maybe Celestia would have to respond somehow. The other thing is that with the power of the gnosis you can manipulate memories of Irminsul and maybe tamper with the past, such as, I don't know, reviving Kandria or even erasing Celestia from history, but this is a huge stretch. Anyway, the Fatui now have probably 6 out of 7 gnosis, as Tsaritsa probably still has her own, and so does the Pyro Archon. One more interesting thing to note is the chessboard that appeared in the Fatui trailer, and many people have already analyzed what it could mean. Basically, I think it represents the battle between Fatui and Celestia, or the gods, and it refers to the probably most well-known chess match in our history, Garry Kasparov versus Deep Blue, which is an AI that eventually defeats him after several games. Alright, that's all I wanted to say in this video. Hopefully I will soon find a balance between me blabbering about stuff and telling actual information. Also, all of this information may become kinda outdated in the future, so please take note of that.